नमस्काराः सर्वेभ्यः। संस्कृतसमितेः आश्रये कुमारसम्भवकाव्यस्य अनुसन्धानं वयं कुर्मः। अधुना षष्ठः श्लोकः समाप्तः, तस्य पुनरावर्तनं किञ्चित् कृत्वा पश्चात् पाठः प्रवर्तिष्यति।
करस्थे हेमाद्रौ गिरिश निकटस्थे धनपतौ गृहस्थे स्वर्भो चामरसुरभिचिन्ता मणिगणे शिरस्थे शीतांशौ चरणयुगलस्थे शुभे कमर्थं दास्येऽहं भवतु भवदर्थं मम मनः.
So in Shloka 6, Parvati has asked permission of her father to go for tapas. And as we saw last time itself, even though she knew very well that the task for which she was setting out was indeed a noble task, an exalted goal, and for the performance of such dharmic acts, one need not ask the permission of others. Still, Parvati would ask her parents' permission to embark upon this venture, because this was no ordinary task. And further, as it is stated in Shakuntala also, so the friends of Shakuntala, namely Priyamada and Anasuya, tell Dushyanta that even in the performance of acts of dharma, dharmacharanepi, she is obedient to her superiors and she is not independent. And therefore, even so here, Parvati, though she knows that she is conscious of the fact that the action for which she is setting out is something very noble, she still seeks the permission of her father, and it is with their blessings that she can be successful in the task that she is taking up. And therefore, Pitaram Ayachata, she begged permission of the author, and she begged for Atmanaha Aranyanivasam, her own stay in the forest till the realization of her objective, Phalodayantaya, and for which she required to have tapas samadhi, or the performance of concentrated efforts. Tapas samadhaye aranyanivasam atmanaha ayachada. And she knew her father quite well. He was manorathajna. He knew what Parvati wanted. So the father had a good understanding of the desire of her daughter, and the daughter also knew very well that her father understands her well. And so, Manorathajnam Pitaram, this Manaswini, Parvati of a resolute mind, she asked permission of her father, and this she did through a close friend of hers, Asanna Sakhi Mukhena. As it is a question of matrimony, there was a natural element of shyness in her, and therefore she would not endeavor to ask that all by herself. And so, through the efforts of a friend, Asanna Sakhi Mukhena, through a friend who was close by, she once asked Sa Kadachit Ayachata, her father, of the permission for performing the tapas. And the father was naturally quite happy. Next. अथानुरूपाभिनिवेशतोषिणा कृताभ्यनुज्ञा गुरुणा गरीयसा प्रजास पश्चात् प्रथितं तदाख्यया जगाम गौरी शिखरं शिखण्डिमत्. And then she was given permission. Kritabhyanujna. There is a lack of clarity in the printing there, so it was copied from a book. So there is a small error also. So Kritabhyanujna. Anujna is permission. Abhyanujna also means the same thing. Krita Abhyanujna. So being permitted. So she was permitted by her father. So the word used for father is guru. In Sanskrit, guru can refer to many things, and here it refers to the father. Guru as a general adjective can refer to anything that is big or great, and here it refers to her father. So one's teacher or preceptor is a great person. So also one's own parents, and sometimes even the husband is called Guru. So Kalidasa himself uses the expression Gauri Guru Pavanaha. Gauri Guru refers to the husband of Parvati. So in one of his plays he uses this expression. So there it refers to the husband. It's a word of general use and extensive implications. Guruna by her father, who was Gariyasa, who was a person who was highly esteemed, and who was also a person who would be very happy. Toshina. Tosha or Santosha in Sanskrit means joy, happiness. Toshin is one who becomes happy. Toshina is a person who becomes happy on account of her abhinivesha, is resolve, which was very apt. Anurupa, what befitted her, her station and stature as a princess. She had a very becoming ambition, and therefore it was nothing unbecoming or unbehoving of a lady of royal ancestry, and therefore the father was very pleased with her resolve because she had made a very right choice. Even though arranged marriages are very common in our country, and that was almost the norm in our country, here Parvati has made her own choice. Of course, this had the prior consent of her father and a prior indication from Narada that she was destined to marry Lord Shiva. And after she asked for the permission, Atha means afterwards, which means connecting with the previous shloka, which says that she sought for permission. After seeking permission, after her seeking permission, her father, who was very glad that she has such an excellent, appropriate and worthy resolve, Anurupa Abhinivesha, so he permitted her, and having been permitted by him, Kritabhyanujna Guruna, by her father, who was himself Gariyasa. In Sanskrit, the word Gariyas is the comparative degree form of the word Guru, an adjective. Guru means great, Gariyas means greater, and Garishtha, the superlative degree, would be the greatest. Here, as the word Guru, Guruna has been in the word Guruna, the word Guru has been used in the sense of an elder, a father in the particular context. Gariyasa does not bring in any contradiction because the same person is referred to as Guru and Gariyas in the positive degree and the comparative degree. So it is not so. The word Guru has been used here not as an adjective but in the sense of a father, a noun, and that is qualified by Gariyasa, means was extraordinary, was held in high esteem. So, being permitted by her father, she went Gauri Jagama. In the last line, you have Jagama Gauri. Gauri went to the place for performing tapas. She went to the peak of a mountain, Shikharam. Shikharam is the peak, which is full of peacocks. Shikhandi Matu. Shikhanda in Sanskrit refers to the plume of a peacock, and Shikhandin refers to the peacock itself, which has those plumes. Shikhandi Matu means full of peacocks. So there are two possessives here. One is the peacock itself having its very many shikhandas, and there is also this matu pratyaya, shikhandi matu. So in and matu both indicate possession. The first one refers to the possession of the shikhanda or the plumes, and so the word shikhandi refers to the peacock, and shikhandi matu refers to the shikhara, which is full of peacocks, abounding in peacocks. Even for the performance of tapas, one should choose a beautiful spot. A place abounding in peacocks is undoubtedly a charming place, and therefore Parvati is now adopting a place which is full of charm, natural beauty, and the place itself came to be known by her name, Prathitam. It became famous. Paschat, in later times, Prajasu Prathitam. It came to be famous among people by that very name, Tad Akhyaya. Akhya means name, by her very name, by the name of Gauri, and therefore the place came to be called Gauri Shikhara. Gauri Shikharam is the name of the mountain because it was there that Parvati realized the fruit of her tapas, tapah phalodaya, and therefore in commemoration of the attainment of the fruit of her extraordinary tapas in that particular peak, the peak came to be called Gauri Shikhara in commemoration of her extraordinary achievement there. And the place was full of peacocks. We can see that in our country, every mountain peak, more or less, is also a place where there is a small temple. And it is in the midst of the beauty and grandeur of nature that even the spiritual becomes much attainable. It is more easy to progress that way, where nature reigns supreme and the beauty and the grandeur of nature becomes very evident. In fact, the very sight of a mountain or the sight of the ocean will show us how small we are. Humility is naturally imparted to us upon seeing such magnificent sights. And here is a place which is also full of peacocks. The presence of peacocks is indicative of one more thing, namely the absence of wild beasts. The cruel animals like the tigers are fond of eating peacocks. If a place abounds in peacocks, it means that the fear of the tiger is not there. And it's not merely the tiger that would be a predator against animals like the peacock. So the absence of all predatory creatures is indicated by the abundance of shikhandi or the peacock. You must note that the Shikhandi Matu, there is this Matu Pratyaya which shows this sense of possession, and the the Pratyaya shows the abundance. It's not that a mountain will be called Shikhandi Matu just because there is one peacock there. Just as we saw last time, that a person is not called Sahridaya simply because he has a heart, and on the other hand, it's only when he has a heart which beats in tune with the poet that is called a Sahridaya. So also in Sanskrit there are a number of suffixes which bring out a sense of possession and in various shades of meaning. For example, a person is called Goman if he has a very big number of cows. So it indicates Bahutva or Bhuman. So a person who has very many cows is called Goman, not a person who has but one cow. Similarly, a person is called Rupavan if he is endowed with extraordinary beauty. It's not, see, everyone has some kind of form or the other. So not all will be called Rupavan. And it's only a person who has an extraordinary beauty that will be called Rupavan. Similarly, certain trees are milky. They are called milky because there is what is known as Nitya Yoga, means they are forever milky. You pinch them, some kind of milky liquid flows therefrom. Sometimes a mere association with something also invites a pratyaya like this. For example, someone holding a danda is called dandin. A person who holds a chhatra is called chhatrin, and therefore there is here a mere association. So in these various shades of meaning, this matu pratyaya or the possessive suffix is added, and here the bahutva of the Shikhandins or the peacocks is very well indicated. Therefore, Parvati chose a place which ultimately came to be known by her very name. So, as we say in English, it became eponymous against a person who has made some great discovery or some great achievement at that particular spot. The place itself comes to possess the person's name. So Parvati here has reached this place, this Shikhara, in the very height of a peak. The summit of a mountain is also one that takes one, that can more easily take one to the summit of Samadhi, the great height of tapas. Parvati chose such a place for the performance of tapas. Parvati could have chosen some place which was rather close to her residence, but it was governed by other considerations, namely a place of peace and plenty, where the bounty of nature was very evident and which had absolutely no issue of any wild animal approaching that spot. These are things that can distract a person's tapas, and therefore the place chosen should be absolutely free from any possibility of fear or distraction of mind or worry and anxiety. And therefore a peaceful place, a mountain peak, was chosen by Parvati, and it was full of the peacocks, and this is indicative of the presence of other similar birds or animals and so on, and also equally the absence of wild beasts that may cause distraction or disturbance to tapas, or even give scope for even the slightest trace of fear. And therefore such a proper place was shown for the performance of, was chosen for the performance of tapas. In many yogic texts we find directions given for the choice of the place of establishing a matha or a monastery for the performance and practice of yoga, and even there the indications that are given are that it should be free from disturbances, even from insects. So in places where trees abound, there are bound to be very many types of insects. On the other hand, if a proper place is chosen, it can be free from all those distractions and disturbances also. While performing tapas, when one gets deeply absorbed in tapas, he loses external awareness. We find, for example, descriptions of sage Valmiki, upon whom an anthill was built, and still he was totally absorbed in his tapas, totally oblivious to the happenings outside. This kind of an absorption in tapas will not make the person get to feel the sensations of what is happening to his body. But on the other hand, it is also important to choose a place where insects would not come and disturb. So moving around on his person or close by can cause disturbance and distraction. And that is why Ramakrishna Paramahamsa used to say that the best place to perform tapas, to do the meditation, was within the confines of the mosquito net, so that there is no mosquito that comes and disturbs him. And so a place like this, where there will be no insects and then no animals of prey, etc., strut about, such a place is a very desirable place for the performance of tapas, and it is such a place that Parvati chose to take up for tapas. Next verse. Vimuchya sahara maharya nischaya vilola yashti pravilupta chandanam babandha balaruna babhru valkalam payodharot sedha vishirna samhati. From this shloka, for under 6 verses, Kalidasa describes the way in which Parvati prepared herself for the performance of tapas. This kind of performance of tapas, where one is totally dedicated to the particular goal, is something different from the daily routine. And herein, a new kind of daily routine is established in place of the old. Even the way a person dresses is also changed. A series of changes that were initiated by Parvati in the course of the performance of her tapas is indicated in these 6 verses. So, one of the first things that she did was what she was doing as a princess. A princess that she was given to a life of pleasure and luxury and enjoyment, which is symbolized by the necklace that she wore that is made of pearls. So haram is the necklace. She removed that. She set that aside. Vimuchya means setting it aside. She no more had need of that necklace of pearls, and therefore she kept it away from her. So she removed it from her person, and that was not necessary now. We can see that later on in Kumarsambhavam, when Parvati actually marries Shiva, all these things would be definitely required, and that would definitely be a new life of enjoyment. And till then, till the attainment of the fruit of her tapas, she would not need these things. So these can only distract the mind sometimes towards a life of pleasure and enjoyment, and therefore that is not required now, and so she has set that aside now. Sa vimuchya, so removing it, removing the haram. Haram vimuchya. She now babandha, she put on, babandha means she came to wear valkalam, the bark garment. Now it's a garment that is made of the bark of the trees, and obviously it's a sort of a rough clothing. that can be made of the bark of the tree. And so she now began to wear that. The word hara is haram is qualified by one adjective, vilola yashti pravilupta chandanam, and the Valkalam is qualified by two adjectives, namely balaruna babhru and payodharotsedha vishirana samhati. These two adjectives qualify Valkalam. The remaining word aharya nischaya in the first line qualifies sa. Sa refers to Parvati, whose nischaya, resolve, was aharya, means something that cannot be shaken, that cannot be moved. In Sanskrit, root hr is to take away. Harya is what can be taken away. Aharya is what cannot be taken away. Aharya Nischaya is a person whose resolution of mind was unshakable, or what could not be altered at all, because it is out of a deep conviction that she has come to this resolve, and therefore this resolve of Parvati was not something that could be altered. Aharya Nischaya is a person whose resolution of mind was unalterable. Such Parvati saw haram vimuchya, she removed the hara. How was the hara? Vilola yashti pravilupta chandanam. She would smear sandal paste upon her bosom, and that would get erased. Lupta means getting erased. On account of lupta or vilupta or pravilupta, all means the same thing. So which would fully erase the sandal paste, the chandanam, that are smeared on her person, on account of the strings. Yashti refers to the strings in the hara, which would be moving about even as she would go for play or would walk around or whatever. So vilola means moving. The moving strings would erase all traces of the sandal paste that she used to wear on her person, that she would smear her person with. Even in the Himalayas, the sandal paste was something that is very desirable, because there is also an object of enjoyment. Smearing a person, one's own person with sandal paste is an object of enjoyment, because it results in coolth. That coolness is something very dear to the body, so very enjoyable to the body, and therefore she used to smear her person with the sandal paste. All objects of enjoyment that were there in our culture were also conducive to the health of a person. There was no object of enjoyment that would be detrimental to the health of a person, the physical health and the mental health and the spiritual health of a person. Such were the kinds of things that were deployed even for acts of enjoyment. However, this could also be an action that could give her some distraction of mind, and therefore it was not worth spending time on this. And as she was now to go through the rigors of tapas, all these things she set aside, and therefore this chandana was not required now. But even more importantly, the haram was not required by her, and therefore Vilola yashti pravilupta chandanam. Obviously the hara had multiple strings. In fact, we get, if you look into our sculpture, ancient sculpture, we can see that there are several types of hara. So there was no repetition or monotony in even the alankaranas or ornamentations that we used to have. And there are different names for different kinds of haras. And Parvati's hara had multiple strings, so it must obviously have been a golden necklace, a necklace of pearls. And it had multiple strings, and on account of this multiplicity of strings, even as she used to play or move about and so on, the hara or the necklace would rub against her person, and that would obliterate the marks of chandana or sandal paste upon her person. Therefore, vilolayashti pravilupta chandanam. So the sandal marks were removed by the hara that she wore. And in place of that, Valkalam Babandha, Parvati now began to wear the Valkala, the bark garment. And how was the bark garment? It was Balaruna Babru. It was somewhat yellowish Babru. The word Babru is used in the sense of brown also in Sanskrit. So brown or slightly reddish brown is also the word used for Babru. And Babru Valkalam Babandha. She now began to wear the bark garment, which was slightly yellowish, and the exact shade of the color is indicated by the adjective that is chosen there, because the word Babru stands for several colors. The correct shade is indicated by the expression Balaruna. Aruna is the sun who is about to rise, so the rising sun. So Balaruna means even the commencement of the day at its very early stage, when the sun is not actually seen, but only the reddish tinge or the yellowish tinge is visible in the sky. That is Balaruna, the young sun or the sun who is about to rise. Balaruna Babru, having the shade of that Balaruna. So that is the color of the Valkala that Parvati now wore. And there is also something which says Payodharot Sedha Vishirana Samhati. The word Valkala is qualified by another expression. Parvati is now in her blooming youth, as a consequence of which the texture of the Valkala, Samhati is the texture, was getting slackened, Vishirna, on account of the Utsedha, means the expansion of her Payodhara, means the bosom. And therefore, the full bloom of youth in Parvati is also described. And the Valkala that she was wearing would gradually, by and by, getting a bit slackened on account of her expanding bosom. And it is such a Valkala that Parvati now wore. So this is indicative of the rigorous life that Parvati is now taking recourse to. A simple life, an utterly simple life. So earlier, as a princess, she used to bedeck herself with excellent ornaments and would naturally be wearing a silken sari. There are references to the silk that was used in those days. In Kalidasa's Shakuntala, we get a reference to the China silk. So towards the end of the first act, he says, Chinam shukam ivaketo ho prativatam niyamanasya. So the presence of trade between India and China and the excellence of China in producing good quality silk is also quite a famous thing. And therefore, she perhaps used to wear the silken garments. Later on in this very canto, we find Shiva, who had come in the guise of a brahmacharin, making a reference to the possibility of her wearing a silken garment and Shiva wearing a dress dripping with blood. He wants to bring out a contrast between the two, and so wants to dissuade Parvati from marrying Shiva. And in that context, he makes a reference to the silken saris that Parvati would be wearing. And therefore, here she has now renounced all those pleasures of royal life and has taken to a simple and rigorous life of an ascetic, and therefore, like all female ascetics, she would now dress herself with the Valkala. And even though the description of the Valkala is, as it were, of a mere uttariya, the upper garment. It is also an upalakshana for her wearing a lower garment also made of Valkala only. And thus, Parvati now relinquished the royal luxuries of a golden necklace made of very many pearls and of multiple strings, and she must have now abandoned even the usage of the sandal paste, because it is also a mark of bhoga. And then, in fact, in Sanskrit texts, it is typical to remark that a person, especially a man, performing tapas, is described as eschewing three things symbolic of his sense of enjoyment. And the typical expression is Sarak Chandana Vanitadi. So, Sarak is the necklace, and then Chandana is the sandal paste, and Vanita is the woman, even if it is his own wife. So all these things are eschewed when a person takes recourse to serious tapas, and therefore here in this shloka we have the indication of the abandonment of Sarak and Chandana, though there is no explicit mention of Chandana as being abandoned by Parvati, so it can be understood from the context. So her removal of the hara, setting it aside, is very clearly stated, and the renunciation of the silken garment and replacing it with the rough and harsh bark garment is what is indicated here. So it stands for simplicity, and it also stands for a sort of a life that is comparable to the very trees in a hermitage. In fact, the trees and plants in a hermitage, they provide a wonderful model of tapas, because the absolutely still position of the plants and trees is also indicative of the stillness of a person deeply absorbed in tapas. And just as they also consume very little food, just the one that is supplied by nature, even so a person deeply absorbed in tapas does not require much food. In fact, for persons who want to turn their mind inwards, mitahara is something that is highly commended in all yoga texts. In fact, mitahara is sometimes listed under the yamas. We get two lists of yamas and niyamas in yoga texts. Sometimes they are described as 5 plus 5, 5 yamas and 5 niyamas, as in Patanjali Yoga Sutra, and sometimes as 10 yamas and 10 niyamas, as described in certain Upanishads or even in works like Hatha Yoga Pradipika and so on. And among those 10, mitahara, or subsistence on very minimal food, is described as something most commendable, because it is when a person eats much. So even a normal person who is leading the life of a grihastha, not to speak of a sannyasin or a tapasvin, either a vanaprastha or a sannyasin. So even in the case of an ordinary grihastha, it is said, the Ayurveda recommends that a person should eat only half his belly and then leave 1/4 for liquids and leave the other 1/4 for circulation of air, and therefore eating more than half one's belly so is highly discouraged, even in Ayurveda, even for a normal person, even for a person given to enjoyments in life. And therefore eating too much is also indicated as an act of sin. So it's not merely that we will be discomfited for some time on account of overeating, but on the other hand, this is also an act of sin, it is said, because eating overmuch is something that turns our mind totally away from turning inwards. So it makes our mind turn totally exterior to exterior things, and it blocks the entry of mind into higher levels and subtler levels. Even good intellectual activity is blocked by the consumption of heavy food, and therefore that is highly discovered. It is also described as anayushya. A person eating too much will live a shorter life than he would if he consumes less food, and therefore eating less would be very conducive to a longer life, and therefore one must always aim at living a long life and living a very healthy life, and therefore this is considered anayushya, and therefore this is also there are even mantras which say that one must say do acts of expiation or penance for eating even over much. So therefore eating much is highly discouraged, and there have been experiments conducted on for example rats, so in which it has been shown that the particular group of rats which were overfed, they came to be lazy, and then their fattened bodies, because of that they could not even very freely move about, and they became very dull and very inactive, and that mental dullness is one hallmark of persons who eat overmuch. On the other hand, the another group of rats were only half fed, and they had to struggle a bit to even get their food, and such rats remained very very active and spirited, and their minds were very bright, and therefore whenever they faced some new problem they could think properly and find some new routes to escape the situation or tackle the problem and so on, and therefore overeating makes the mind also very dull, and therefore those who want to emphasize the development of intelligence should try to see that they consume less and are not overfull, and in case there is an overeating of food, they must compensate by trying to forego food in the next session or whatever, and therefore the trees and plants in the hermitage, they also consume very little food, and that's also an ideal of tapas, and therefore being in the midst of such trees and plants itself is an indication of being in the midst of very many good models of tapas, and therefore Parvati now chose to be in this forest in the mountain peak and perform her tapas with the most minimal of needs. So the life of luxury was totally given up by Parvati.
विमुच्य साहारमहार्य निश्चया विलोलयष्टिप्रविलुप्तचन्दनं बबन्धबालारुणबभ्रुवल्कलम् पयोधरोत्सेधविशीर्णसंहति सा आहार्य निश्चया हारं विमुच्य वल्कलं बबन्ध हारं विलोलयष्टिप्रविलुप्तचन्दनं हारं विमुच्य बालारुणबभ्रुवल्कलं बबन्ध सा आहार्य निश्चया सा पयोधरोत्सेधविशीर्णसंहति बालारुणबभ्रुवल्कलं बबन्ध.
The next verse is indicative of the other preparations that Parvati made. Yatha prasiddhair madhuram shiroruhair jatabhirapyevam abhut tadananam na shatpada shrenibhireva pankajam sa shaivala sangamapi prakashate. Earlier, Parvati used to have, naturally, as a princess, so well-combed hair and well-bedecked hair. Shiroruha refers to the hair. Shiras is head, Ruha is what grows there, and therefore Shiroruha refers to the hair. In Sanskrit, the word kararuha is used for the nails and shiroruha for the hair. The shiroruhas used to be prasiddha. The word prasiddha in Sanskrit has the famous sense of being famous. Here, the word prasiddha, however, does not mean famous, so it refers to being embellished. There is the saying in Amarakosha, so referring to the two meanings of the word prasiddha. Prasiddhau khyata bhushitau. Khyata means famous and bhushita means decorated, bedecked, and therefore here it is used in that sense of bhushita, and therefore prasiddhaihi shiroruhaihi means bhushitaihi keshaihi. So with her hair shiroruha, which was well adorned, prasiddha, so by means of combing and doing proper arrangements and so on. If you look into ancient sculpture, you can see the various ways in which the hair was decorated, and therefore then there could be a considerable variety in that also. And they used to also not only wear flowers upon the head for decoration, there was also a number of ornaments. There are different kinds of ornaments to adorn one's own head and one's own hair, and therefore Parvati must have been using quite a few of them. And with her hair that was so very well bedecked and ornamented, prasiddhaihi shiroruhaihi, her face looked very charming. Madhuram means charming. Prasiddhaihi shiroruhaihi madhuram. What was madhuram? Abhut. It was very charming. What was very charming? Tad ananam. Tat means her, ananam means face. Parvati's face looked very charming. Madhuram abhut by prasiddhaihi shiroruhaihi, by the well decorated hair. And the poet says that even with the matted hair, jata is matted hair, and even with matted hair, jatabhirhi api evam tadananam madhuram abhut. Her face looked similarly beautiful, similarly charming. Jata is matted hair. Now in the course of the performance of tapas, it is not desirable to have one's hair in the usual fashion, because that itself would require a lot of attention. We can see women having a lot of hair, a thick growth of hair, paying a lot of attention to keeping that in a proper condition. So they have to bathe regularly, and then they apply oil, comb it properly, and so on and so forth. So these become some requirements which are very essential, and otherwise an unkempt hair would look very ugly on a person. Tapas is not something that is associated with ugliness. On the other hand, it has to do everything with beauty and charm coupled with simplicity. So on account of that simplicity, the norms and patterns of beauty can change, and therefore Parvati, while performing tapas, had now put on jatas, had formed jatas out of her hair. Now this matting of the hair is done by the employment of a particular type of oil called ingudi taila, and on account of that the hair becomes matted and it grows into sort of lumps of hair, and that would not cause any disturbance to the person, because even if a person does not pay much attention to the oiling of the hair, so it is not required now at all, still it's not something that gets that becomes unhealthy in its condition. So it maintains its health, and this is not something that is irreversible. So after some time, after the conclusion of tapas, one can get back one's the hair in the former condition, and therefore this is not an irreversible condition, and this is not something that distracts a person. Now, when a person stands in front of a mirror, that itself is a source of distraction, because the mirror has very beautifully been called in Sanskrit darpana. So darpa is arrogance. So what increases arrogance in a person is darpana. It is as though nature has given a blessing or perhaps a curse, that every person who stands before the mirror thinks that the object that he sees in the mirror is something beautiful. So to everyone, his or her own voice is sweet, and even so his or her own person is charming, and therefore verily the mirror has been aptly called darpana, or one that inspires arrogance. And therefore this matter of enhancement of one's own pride should be done away with, and therefore there is no need for Parvati to stand in front of the mirror and give extraordinary care to her extraordinary hair, and therefore that so much of time is saved and so much of attention to the body is saved. A good deal of the performance of tapas consists in drawing the mind away from the body. Ultimately, in the high levels and peaks of tapas, a total absence of bodily awareness is what is to be attained, and therefore all steps that draw the mind away from the body consciousness so will help for the performance of tapas. And therefore, even for these reasons, Parvati now had put on matted hair in lieu of her natural normal hair that was in abundance, and we get beautiful descriptions of the very hair of Parvati in expressions like ghanas snigdhash lakshnam chikura nikurambam tavashive and so on. And so Parvati would now eschew all attention to the hair that would demand a lot of attention because of the abundance of the hair and the curliness and the sweetness of its look and so on and so forth. And therefore now, as all those would prove a distraction to the tapas and a distraction from the focus of the mind inwards, because paying attention to the body so would definitely be a source of distraction for the mind. So even that had to be totally given up, and therefore Parvati now totally abandoned the earlier kind of bedecking of her hair. So in place of that came this matted hair. And Kalidasa says that in spite of that, there was no way in which her beauty was detracted. So he gives a beautiful comparison. Pankajam prakashate, the lotus shines in the presence of a row of bees, Shatpada Shreni. So the bees are called Shatpada because they are 6-footed. And Shatpada Shreni Bihi, so the red lotuses surrounded by dark rows of bees would be a beautiful combination, and they match each other, and the lotus shines even better on account of the presence of the Shatpada Shreni, or these numerous bees that hover around the lotus. And Kalidasa says it is not merely in the presence of those rows of bees that the lotus shines, but even in the company of the moss, Shaivala or Shaivala in Sanskrit, both words mean moss or what is called pachi, and so which is somewhat greenish, and it's not exactly a good luxuriant growth of very desirable plants or vegetation. And in spite of this, so Shaivala Sangam Api, so the association, Sangha of the Shaivala. So even with that, Shaivala Sangam Api, Pankajam Prakashate, the lotus looks charming. And therefore, the charm of the lotus, which is undiminished on account of the absence of Shatpada Shreni, is given as an analogy for the attraction of the madhuratva of the anana of Parvati. Parvati's face is comparable to the lotus. So Parvati's face was like the lotus, and then her dark hair, so Shiroruha, comparable to the dark, see, rows of bees, swarms of bees that would surround the lotus, so Shatpada Shreni, and that would make it prasiddha or very charming. But here, in spite of the presence of the jatas or matted hair, her face looked charming, even as the lotus would look even beautiful, equally beautiful, even in the company of the moss. So MOSS, moss. So even that would not be able to detract the natural beauty of the lotus. So things which are endowed with a natural beauty, so continue to remain charming and beautiful in spite of change of circumstances. And therefore, it's not merely the exterior things that impart beauty to something. So we all do makeup. So in English we say you have to make up for the losses, okay? And therefore our makeup is also for something that we miss in our own person. On the other hand, there was no need for any makeup for a person like Parvati, because even without them she would look equally charming. You can see that in Kalidasa's Shakuntala also is similar description is given in respect of Shakuntala. There he says, Sarasija Manovidham Shaivalena Piramyam. So even surrounded by the moss, the lotus looks charming. Malenavapi Himamshor Lakshma Lakshmin Tanoti. So the orb of the moon looks even equally beautiful, even though it has that dark patch, Himamshoho Lakshma, that patch. So in spite of that, it looks charming. And therefore he says, Kimevehi Madhuranam Mandanam Nakritinam. And therefore, Yamadhika Manognya Valkalenapi Tanvi. And this young lady, this slender girl, Yam Tanvi, Valkalenapi Manognya. So in spite of the Valkalas, even putting on the Valkalas, she is looking charming. Kimivahi Mudhuranam Mandanam Nakritinam. For things endowed with a natural beauty, what does not act as an ornament, asks Kalidasa, and the same idea is repeated in this. There are many critics who try to posit the idea of multiple Kalidasas, from some wrote some plays and some wrote poetry and so on. On the other hand, we get a number of ideas which are common to these famous works of Kalidasa. So across these works we get the same idea, obviously indicative of the sameness of the author. And therefore, in this shloka, Kalidasa shows how even upon giving up the decoration of the hair and assuming the matted hair, Parvati looked equally charming, and there was in no way that her beauty was detracted on account of the putting on of the new guise by Parvati for the purpose of the performance of her tapas.
षट्पदश्रेणिभिरेव पङ्कजं सशैवलासङ्गमपि प्रकाशते षट्पदश्रेणिभिरेव पङ्कजं प्रकाशते सशैवलासङ्गमपि प्रकाशते पङ्कजं प्रकाशते.
So Kalidasa has said that her face was very charming. Tadananam madhuram abhut. In the next words, he refers to the Maunji Bandhana of Parvati and the consequence of that. So we shall deal with in our next session. So, Namassarvebhyaha. Namaskara.